Airport security accused a quiet maintenance worker of stealing a passenger's $20,000 watch and marched him out like a criminal. 3 days later, armed men seized Terminal C, and the same man was the only one who knew the way in. Mason Cole had a gift for disappearing in plain sight. At 52, he was the kind of man people noticed once, then forgot. 6 feet tall when he stood straight, which he rarely did. Silver at the temples. Weathered hands. Quiet eyes. A limp so faint most folks assumed it came from an old football injury or too many years on concrete floors. He lived alone in a modest ranch house on the edge of Pine Ridge, Colorado, where the subdivisions thinned into scrub oak, brown grass, and long blue views of the Front Range. His neighbors knew him as the man who shoveled sidewalks before sunrise and fixed porch lights without ever leaving a bill. The mail carrier knew he drank black coffee and never ordered anything fancy. The kids on the block knew he kept a jar of dog treats by the garage for every wandering mutt. At Pine Ridge International Airport, Mason was just the night shift maintenance guy, not security, not management, not anyone important. He wore a faded, reflective vest with, if you enjoy stories of courage, justice, and redemption, subscribe to The Wrong Man, Axar? Then drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to welcome you. With his name stitched over the pocket, he carried a dented thermos, a heavy ring of keys, and a small black notebook where he logged everything from flickering lights to loose bolts on baggage carts. He changed air filters above gate B12. He fixed jammed escalators before the morning rush. He replaced bulbs in the parking garage. He checked emergency exits. He drove the electric cart for elderly passengers whose knees couldn't handle long concourses. He arrived 15 minutes early every shift and left without fanfare. If someone thanked him, he gave a small nod and said, "Just doing the job." Nobody at Pine Ridge knew that Mason Cole had once been Master Sergeant Mason Cole of the United States Army, attached to a classified Delta Force squadron whose operations never appeared on the evening news. Nobody knew he had spent more than 2 decades moving through the worst corners of the world under names that were not his own. Nobody knew he had pulled wounded men from burning vehicles in Syria, tracked hostage-takers through alleys in Mosul, and once carried a young intelligence officer with a shattered leg 3 miles through enemy territory while half a province hunted them. Nobody knew there was a locked steel box beneath his bed containing medals, folded flags from funerals, old photographs, sealed commendations, and a letter from a general who wrote that Mason's actions had saved an entire special operations team from annihilation. Mason preferred it that way. A man could survive war and still be haunted by the silence afterward. His wife, Ellen, had understood that better than anyone. She had been a nurse, soft-spoken and stubborn in the way only truly kind people can be. She never asked for details he couldn't give. She sat with him through the nightmares. She reminded him to breathe when his mind dragged him back to places his body had escaped. Then cancer took her in 14 months. After that, Mason stopped trying to explain himself to the world. He sold the house they'd bought near Fort Bragg, moved west, and took the first job that let him work with his hands and keep his head down. Pine Ridge International was expanding fast, trying to become a major gateway for overseas flights, and the airport needed maintenance workers willing to take nights, weekends, holidays, and blizzards. Mason took all of it. Routine helped. Locks, lights, hinges, boiler pressure, door alarms, air handlers, conveyor belts, work orders, coffee, quiet. That was the life he chose. And for almost 3 years, it worked. People trusted Mason because he never asked for anything. When Helen Acker, a 78-year-old widow flying to Phoenix, lost the bag containing her heart medication, Mason found it wedged behind a row of seats near Gate 4 and brought it to her with a cup of water. When an escalator froze during Thanksgiving travel and people began shouting, Mason climbed into the access panel, loosened a crushed luggage wheel from the mechanism, and had it running before airport management even arrived. When a little boy named Tommy Whitaker got separated from his mother during a weather delay, Mason didn't panic or call over the loudspeaker and embarrass the child. He knelt, spoke calmly, asked Tommy what his mom's shoes looked like, then walked him terminal to terminal until they found her crying beside customer service. And one Friday night, when a drunk passenger smashed a beer bottle against a charging station and started threatening a gate agent, Mason stepped between them, spoke in a low voice, redirected the man's rage, and guided him to the floor with such smooth control that bystanders barely understood what had happened. When the incident report came through, Mason gave credit to airport police. "Security handled it fine," he said. "The officers knew better. So did Lena Brooks." Lena was a ground operations coordinator in her early 30s, raising a 6-year-old daughter by herself. She worked too hard, slept too little, and moved through the airport with a tablet in one hand and a radio clipped to her belt, solving problems for airlines that paid her company just enough to keep her exhausted. Her daughter, Sophie, spent more time than any child should in employee break rooms and airport offices, coloring in spiral notebooks while her mother finished one last thing. Mason had fixed Lena's old Honda twice in the employee lot and refused payment both times. "You keep saving me money, Mr. Cole," Lena told him one icy evening. "I'm going to start claiming you as a dependent." Mason smiled faintly. "Just keep oil in it. Is that your answer to everything?" Most things. She liked him because he listened. Not the way most men listened, waiting for their turn to speak. Mason listened like every word had weight. Then there was Ray Donovan. Ray ran night security at Pine Ridge. He was 41, broad-shouldered, charming, always chewing cinnamon gum and calling everyone brother, whether he liked them or not. He had a laugh that carried across the concourse and a habit of slapping people on the back hard enough to make them spill coffee. Ray and Mason became friends, or something close to it. They ate late dinners at a 24-hour diner off Route 86. Ray complained about airport politics. Mason mostly listened. Ray talked about his ex-wife, his teenage daughter, the father he claimed had been a Vietnam vet, and the old pickup he could never keep running. Mason fixed that truck 3 times. Ray once watched him lean over the engine with a flashlight between his teeth and said, "Man, you missed your calling. You should have been a mechanic." Mason tightened a hose clamp and replied, "I've been called worse." Ray laughed. Mason trusted him. That was the part that would hurt the most later. Because while Mason saw a loud, flawed, basically decent man trying to keep his life together, Ray Donovan was already drowning. It started with sports betting, a few $100s here and there, then thousands, then credit cards, then personal loans. Then a man named Vic Salerno began showing up outside Ray's apartment building in a black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. Salerno was not a bookie, though he sometimes acted like one. He moved stolen goods, illegal firearms, and people with money through holes in systems that men like Ray were paid to protect. At first, Ray told himself he wasn't doing anything serious. A camera outage in a service corridor, a patrol reassigned for 12 minutes, a loading dock gate left unchecked, a note in the log entered 15 minutes late. Salerno told him it was electronics, untaxed imports, gray market phones, high-end watches, nothing violent. Ray wanted to believe him. Then one night he saw a crate split open near the catering dock. Inside were rifle parts wrapped in oil paper. Ray told Salerno he was done. Salerno smiled and showed him photographs of Ray's daughter outside her school. After that, Ray stopped pretending he had a choice. But he still had one. That was the truth he could never escape. He could have gone to the FBI. He could have confessed. He could have protected his daughter by telling the truth before the rot spread. Instead, he protected himself. And when Mason Cole noticed the first crack in the wall, Ray chose betrayal. It happened on a cold Tuesday just after midnight. Mason was checking pressure gauges in the mechanical corridor behind Terminal C, part of the airport's new international wing. Terminal C still smelled like fresh paint and construction dust. Half the stores weren't open yet. The prayer room, nursing suite, and secondary baggage inspection area had only been completed 6 months earlier. Mason paused beside a gray steel service door marked Key 117. It was closed. The electronic log said it had been locked since 11:08 p.m., but Mason saw a thin crescent of disturbed dust near the bottom hinge. Fresh scuffing. The kind left when a door opens inward and drags grit across sealed concrete. He crouched. There were wheel marks, too, narrow and doubled, not from the standard airport baggage carts. These tires were softer, industrial, the sort used on low-profile dollies. He followed the marks 20 feet down the corridor. They disappeared near a blind spot under a camera dome. Mason looked up. The camera's indicator light was steady, operational. He checked his notebook. 2 nights earlier, camera key 12 had lost signal for 12 minutes. The next night, same thing, same time window. 1:42 to 1:54 a.m., a coincidence could happen once. Twice was a pattern. 3 times was a plan. Mason did not run to management. He did not make accusations. He had spent a lifetime learning that facts mattered more than suspicion, so he went to Ray. Ray was in the security office, leaning back in his chair with a microwave burrito cooling in front of him. Mason closed the door. Ray looked up. "You look serious. Terminal C has a problem." Ray's smile faded a little. "What kind?" "Service door opening after lockout. Wheel marks where they shouldn't be. Camera losing signal same time every night." Ray sat still. Too still. Mason noticed. But because he trusted Ray, he gave him the benefit of the doubt. "You think contractors?" Ray asked. "I think someone's moving something through that corridor." Ray rubbed his jaw. "You tell anyone else?" "No." "Good." Ray stood and paced once to the window. "I mean, good, because if you're right, we don't want to spook anyone. Could be internal, could be a glitch. Let me pull access logs quietly." Mason studied him. "Quietly doesn't mean buried." Ray looked wounded. "Come on, Mace. You know me." Mason did, or thought he did. Ray put a hand on his shoulder. "I appreciate you bringing this to me. I'll handle it." The next night, Mason Cole became a thief. At least that was what the evidence said. A businessman flying in from Dallas reported a missing leather carry-on from lost baggage. He claimed it contained confidential documents, cash, and a limited-edition Swiss watch worth nearly $20,000. Airport security reviewed footage. There was Mason walking near the lost baggage office around the time the bag disappeared. The angle was bad. The timestamp looked right. Then Ray Donovan and 2 airport police officers opened Mason's locker. Inside, beneath a rolled-up rain jacket, they found the missing watch and an envelope with $6,000 in cash. For the first time anyone at Pine Ridge could remember, Mason looked genuinely confused. "That isn't mine," he said. Ray stood nearby, holding the evidence bag, his face pale and miserable. "Mason," Ray said, voice heavy, "I don't want to believe this." "Then don't. The footage puts you there. I was fixing a jammed latch on the janitor closet by baggage claim. Work order 7,216. Ray swallowed. "There's no active work order for that location." Then someone deleted it. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. Ray looked away. "I have to file the report." Mason stared at him. In that moment, something passed between them. Not proof. Not yet. Recognition. Ray could not hold his gaze. Mason was suspended pending investigation. By sunrise, the rumor had traveled from Terminal C to the rental car counters. By noon, it had mutated. The quiet maintenance guy had stolen from passengers. Maybe he'd been doing it for months. Maybe he was part of a baggage theft ring. Maybe that drunk passenger he helped was actually someone he had threatened. People who had waved at Mason for years suddenly found reasons to look at their phones when he passed. Lena Brooks cornered her supervisor and said, "This is wrong." Mason wouldn't steal a paperclip. Her supervisor lowered his voice. "Lena, I'm saying this because I like you. You're a single mom with a good job. Don't attach yourself to a man under investigation." "So we're just supposed to watch him get railroaded?" We're supposed to let the process work. Lena laughed bitterly. That's what people say when they're afraid to do the right thing. She found Mason near the employee entrance, cleaning out his locker under supervision. He folded his reflective vest and placed his keys on the bench. Mason, she said softly. He turned. I don't believe it. I know. I'll say that to anyone. No. His voice was gentle but firm. You'll take care of your daughter. Her eyes filled. That's not fair. Most things aren't. He picked up his thermos, now empty, and walked out of Pine Ridge International without looking back. Ray watched from behind a glass wall. For half a second, shame almost turned him around. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Sailor No. Good work. Keep him away. Ray put the phone in his pocket and told himself Mason would leave town. But Mason did not leave. Not at first. He went home, made coffee, and sat at his kitchen table with his old notebook. He wrote down every detail he remembered from the last 30 days. Door alarms, camera failures, patrol schedules, vehicle access, names, times, weather. The little things. Always the little things. He did not hack servers. He did not sneak past police tape. He did not break into the airport. He simply remembered. Men like Mason were trained to notice what others dismissed. Dust on a shoe, a missing lock tag, a catering truck parked where no catering truck should be, a camera outage that lasted exactly 12 minutes because someone believed 12 minutes was too short to matter. The second frame-up came 3 nights later. A guard named Pete Larkin claimed Mason had returned to the airport after midnight, attacked him in a service hallway, and stolen his access badge. There was video, grainy and dark, showing a man of Mason's build moving through a corridor. Pete had a bruised cheek. Ray filed the incident report. The local police came to Mason's house at 6:15 in the morning. He saw them through the front window before they knocked. 2 patrol cars, 3 officers, hands resting near their belts. Mason opened the door before they touched the bell. "Muster Cole?" one asked. "Yes, we need you to come with us." Mason looked past them at the mountains, blue in the morning cold. Then he turned around and placed his hands behind his back. He did not resist. He did not raise his voice. But when the cuffs clicked around his wrists, something inside him went quiet in a way that frightened even him. He had been zip-tied in a basement outside Fallujah. He had been shot at, hunted, blown off his feet, and left half-conscious in the dirt. None of that felt like this, because this was not an enemy across a battlefield. This was a friend using trust as a weapon. After 12 hours of questioning, the police released him. There was not enough direct evidence to charge him. Pete's story had gaps. The video was too poor. Mason's phone location placed him near his home, but damage did not require a conviction. He returned to his empty house after dark. The rooms were still. Ellen's photograph sat on the mantel, her smile frozen in a summer afternoon he could no longer enter. Mason poured a glass of water and stood there without drinking. Maybe this was the lesson. Maybe he had been foolish to believe he could live normally. Maybe men like him carried war into every room they entered, and sooner or later, people either feared them, used them, or pushed them out. He packed 1 duffel bag, 2 changes of clothes, his shaving kit, a framed photograph of Ellen, the locked steel box from beneath the bed. Before dawn, Mason loaded it into his truck. He was going to leave Pine Ridge. He was going to disappear again. Then a 12-year-old boy changed everything. Tommy Whitaker had not meant to record a crime. He had been stuck at Pine Ridge with his mother during a weather delay, bored out of his mind, filming random airport stuff on his phone for a video he planned to call Worst Layover Ever. He filmed a janitor dancing with a mop. He filmed a service dog wearing little boots. He filmed himself making faces at a dark window. And in the corner of one shaky clip, down a hallway beyond a half-open employee door, he captured Ray Donovan opening Mason Cole's locker. Not after the watch was discovered. Before. The angle was far away, but clear enough. Ray slipped something inside, looked over his shoulder, and walked away. Tommy didn't realize what he had until his mother, Dana, saw a local news story about Mason's suspension and recognized the airport security supervisor on her son's video. Dana Whitaker tried to email the clip to airport management. The message bounced. She tried again. Blocked. She called the general office and got transferred 3 times before being told to submit a formal complaint online. So she contacted Lena Brooks, whose name Tommy remembered because she was the nice lady with the tablet who found us a hotel voucher. Lena watched the video in a break room with her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. She copied the file to a USB drive and tucked it into the lining of her lunch bag. Then she forwarded a backup to a private cloud account under an old password she hadn't used in years. After that, she went looking for airport police. She never made it. Ray caught her outside the police substation near Terminal B, her daughter Sophie sitting on a bench by the employee entrance with a coloring book and a half-eaten granola bar. Ray smiled like nothing was wrong. "Lena," he said. "Got a second?" She stopped. "Not really." His eyes dropped to the lunch bag under her arm. "What's in there?" "My lunch. At 5 in the afternoon? You keeping track of my eating habits now?" Ray's smile vanished. "Hand it over." Lena took a step back. No, 2 contract security officers appeared behind Ray. Men Lena had seen around but never trusted. Both wore airport badges. Neither looked at her daughter. Ray lowered his voice. "You accessed restricted files and attempted to transmit security footage to an outside party. That's a data breach." Lena stared at him. "You're insane. I'm trying to keep you from making this worse. You framed Mason." Ray's jaw tightened. From the bench, Sophie looked up. "Mommy?" Lena's face changed instantly. Ray noticed. He stepped closer, his voice so low only she could hear. "You're going to come with me to Cheops. You're going to sit down. You're going to keep your mouth shut. And you're going to think real hard about what happens when people make trouble around here. If you touch my daughter." "I'm not touching anybody," Ray said. "Not unless you make me." He took her badge and radio in one quick motion, then held out his hand for the lunch bag. Lena clutched it tighter. Ray leaned in. "Don't be stupid." One of the guards moved toward Sophie. Lena's breath caught. Slowly, she handed over the bag. Ray dug through it, found the USB drive, and slipped it into his pocket. "You're making a mistake," Lena said. "No," Ray whispered. "I made that a long time ago." He had the guards escort Lena to the Terminal C operations room under a false data breach accusation. He told the staff she was being contained until airported and security could investigate. Then he left Sophie near the employee entrance with one of Sailor No's men wearing a contractor jacket. "Just keep her there," Ray said, voice shaking. "Her mom needs motivation." The man looked at the little girl and smiled without warmth. Ray looked away. At 4:37 p.m. on a packed Friday, Terminal C went dark. Not completely, just enough. Flight boards flickered. Security cameras froze. Fire doors slammed shut in the wrong sequence. A smoke alarm began screaming near the kitchen service area. Travelers stood up, confused, annoyed, phones already raised. Then 5 armed men moved through the international waiting lounge. They wore airport contractor jackets. They carried compact rifles hidden under garment bags. Within 60 seconds, more than 40 people were forced into the seating area near gates C-18 and C-19. Families, business travelers, a flight crew, 2 children in soccer jerseys, an elderly man on oxygen, a state senator headed to Washington, and Sophie Brooks, 6 years old, pink backpack in her lap, frozen among strangers while a man with a rifle shouted for everyone to get down. In the operations room above the concourse, Lena saw her daughter on a frozen camera feed just before it cut out. "No," she whispered. The door behind her opened. Ray stepped in, pale and sweating, followed by one of Sailor No's men. The man tossed a phone onto the console. On the screen was a live video feed of Sophie sitting between a terrified woman and the elderly man with oxygen. "Erase the backup," the man said. "Then reopen the compromised security controls. Lena stared at him. I can't, he smiled. Sure you can. Ray wouldn't look at her. Lena turned on him. Ray, she's 6. I didn't know they were going to take her, Ray said, voice cracking. But they did, and now you're standing there. The man with the gun stepped closer. Erase it. Lena's hands trembled over the keyboard. She deleted the cloud backup while Ray watched. But Lena was good at her job. Under pressure, terrified for her child, she still did one brave thing. Before confirming the deletion, she routed a hidden system snapshot into a temporary flight operations cache tied to an outbound maintenance log. It wouldn't last forever. It might not survive a full reboot, but it was something. Then Sailor Nose Man shoved a radio toward her. Now unlock the security controls. I don't have full access, Lena said. Then get it. I'm telling you, I don't have it. The man pressed the barrel of his rifle against the console near her hand. On the phone screen, Sophie began to cry. Lena closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she prayed for Mason Cole to come back. 10 miles away, Mason was driving west with his duffel bag on the passenger seat when the emergency broadcast cut into the radio. Developing situation at Pine Ridge International Airport. Reports of armed suspects and hostages inside Terminal C. Law enforcement is establishing a perimeter. Travelers are urged to avoid the area. Mason slowed. For 1 second, his hands tightened on the wheel. Then another update came over the radio. Unconfirmed reports indicate several airport employees may be trapped inside, including operations staff. Mason saw Lena's face in his mind, then Sophie's. A little girl sitting in his maintenance cart 2 months earlier, swinging her legs while he fixed her mother's car. Mr. Mason, she had asked, were you ever scared of the dark? He had handed her a flashlight and said, everybody's scared of something. The trick is not letting it make your choices for you. Now he made a U-turn across the empty highway median and drove back toward town. He did not think about whether they would arrest him. He did not think about whether anyone would believe him. He thought about Lena. He thought about Sophie. He thought about elderly passengers in wheelchairs and children clutching stuffed animals while men with guns shouted orders. By the time Mason reached the airport perimeter, police cruisers blocked every access road. SWAT trucks idled near the curb. Ambulances lined the outer lane. News helicopters circled in the winter-gray sky. An officer stepped in front of Mason's truck with one hand raised. Rods closed. I worked maintenance in Terminal C, Mason said. I know the service corridors. The officer's eyes hardened. Name? Mason Cole, recognition flickered. Not the good kind. You need to stay right here. I know the old utility access behind the interfaith room. It's not on the current digital map because the remodel walled off the public entrance, but the maintenance crawl still runs under C18. The officer hesitated. Mason continued, calm and precise. There's a secondary fire panel in the basement mechanical room beneath the east kitchen. If they locked the doors through the main system, that panel may still override zones manually. Camera K-12 has been compromised for weeks. Door 117 is part of the smuggling route. The officer stared at him. A woman in a Navy FBI windbreaker turned from a command table nearby. What did you say your name was? Mason looked at her. She was older now, late 40s maybe. Dark hair pulled tight, sharp eyes, a scar near her chin. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said, very quietly, Cole? Mason's face changed. Not much. Enough. Erica Voss, he said. The FBI agent looked like she had seen a ghost. 21 years earlier, Lieutenant Erica Voss had been a young intelligence officer in Iraq when a hostage rescue operation went sideways. Her convoy was hit. Her security detail was killed or scattered. She had been dragged into a safe house with a broken leg and a rifle in her face. The man who came through the wall to get her out had been Mason Cole. She had never forgotten his voice telling her, "Stay behind me, Lieutenant. We're going home." Now he stood in front of her in a worn flannel shirt, accused of theft and assault by the same airport he was trying to save. The SWAT commander stepped in. "Agent Voss, we don't have time for reunions. This man is a suspect in an active investigation." Voss did not take her eyes off Mason. "Verify him," she said. "With who?" She gave him a number. "Federal Secure Line, now." 5 minutes later, the command post changed. A Homeland Security official confirmed what most of the people standing there were not cleared to hear. Mason Cole was a retired Delta Force operator with a sealed service record. He had extensive experience in hostage rescue, infrastructure breach planning, and crisis response in transportation environments. His Department of Defense file included commendations for actions in classified urban operations. The SWAT commander looked back at Mason with a different expression. Not worship, not awe. Professional respect. He handed Mason a tablet map of Terminal C. Mason did not smile. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not straighten like a man finally recognized. He simply studied the layout. "They've locked the fire doors wrong," he said. The commander frowned. "Wrong how?" "Not random. This pattern channels hostages toward the gates and blocks law enforcement from the public concourse. It also keeps baggage access open." Mason zoomed in on the map. His jaw tightened. "What?" Voss asked. "Ray suggested this exact lock sequence during a training drill last year. Said it would prevent crowd surge in an active threat scenario." The commander's face darkened. "Ray Donovan?" Mason nodded. "Security supervisor," Voss said. Mason looked toward Terminal C, where smoke rose faintly behind the glass. "He didn't just frame me," he said. "He gave them the airport." Voss's radio crackled. "Command, we have possible confirmation of a child hostage." 6-year-old female, name Sophie Brooks, daughter of airport operations employee Lena Brooks. Mason went still. Voss saw the change in his eyes. "You know them?" Mason nodded once. The SWAT commander said, "We're getting reports the operations employee may be under duress. Suspects are trying to force system access." Mason looked back at the terminal. The ordinary maintenance man was gone now. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the air around him changed. His voice stayed quiet. "Then we're out of time." They moved fast after that. Mason did not take command. He did not pretend to be law enforcement. He made that clear. "You have your team," he told the commander. "Use them. I know the building. That's all." But sometimes knowing the building was the difference between a rescue and a massacre. Mason laid out 3 priorities. First, open a path for the most vulnerable hostages through the service corridor behind the International Lounge. Second, isolate the armed men from the baggage system where the device had supposedly been placed. Third, restore partial camera access through the auxiliary panel in the basement, bypassing the corrupted main feed. "And Lena Brooks," Mason said. "If they're forcing her to work the system, they'll keep her in key ops. She may still have limited internal routing." Voss looked at him. "You think she can help?" "She already has." A small SWAT element would enter through an old maintenance tunnel beneath the east loading dock. Mason would guide them as far as the mechanical room. Agent Voss would coordinate from command. Bomb techs would stage near the baggage access point. Before they moved, Voss handed Mason a tactical vest. He looked at it. For a second, the years folded. Dust, blood, radio static. A man screaming for his mother in the dark. Mason closed his eyes. Breathe in 4. Hold 4. Out 6. Ellen's voice in his memory. "Come back to the room, Mason." He opened his eyes and put on the vest. The tunnel smelled of oil, concrete, and old water. Mason led the team, crouched beneath pipes he had repaired with his own hands. Every junction was familiar. Every valve had a memory. Halfway through, a metal wrench slipped from a SWAT officer's pouch and struck the floor with a sharp clang. Mason froze. For one terrible instant, he was not in Colorado. He was in a blown-out building overseas, hearing the metallic snap before the ambush opened. His breathing shortened. The officer behind him whispered, "Cole?" Mason placed one palm against the concrete wall. Not there. Here. Not then. Now. He forced air into his lungs. "I'm good," he whispered. He was not the young operator anymore. His knees hurt. His shoulder ached in cold weather. His ghosts traveled with him. But courage had never meant the absence of fear. It meant moving with it. They reached the basement panel. Mason opened it with a key no one had thought to collect from his locker. A damaged internal line crackled. "This is Brooks," Lena's voice whispered, strained and thin. "If anyone can hear me, I'm trapped in key ops. They have my daughter. They made me delete the video backup. I have partial flight system access, but security controls are locked out." Mason took the radio. "Lena, it's Mason." A pause. Then, breathless, "Mason? You hurt?" "No, Sophie." "I know. We're going to get her." Her voice broke. "They have a gun on her. Listen to me. Look at your hands." "What?" "Look at your hands." Put them flat on the console. A shaky breath came over the line. "Okay, now breathe. In 4. Hold 4. Out 6. Mason, I can't. You can." "Sophie needs you steady." Silence. Then Lena inhaled, held, exhaled. Mason's voice softened. "Good. Now I need you to listen carefully." He guided her through a manual reset sequence, using her flight operations console to reroute internal communications while he and the SWAT tech worked the auxiliary fire controls. "They made me erase the backup," Lena whispered. "Did you? A pause." "I hid a system snapshot in a temporary maintenance cache. It'll purge if they reboot flight ops." For the first time that day, Mason almost smiled. "Good girl. They took my badge. Badges open doors. You open bigger ones. Despite everything." Lena gave a shaky laugh. Then the first set of fire doors unlocked. In the concourse above, smoke thickened from the kitchen fire. Hostages coughed and cried. One of the gunmen paced near the lounge entrance, agitated by sirens and the distant bullhorn outside. Sophie sat rigid between two strangers, tears streaking her cheeks, pink backpack clutched against her chest. The elderly man beside her whispered, "You doing okay, sweetheart?" She shook her head. "What's your name? Sophie? I'm Harold." He adjusted the oxygen tube beneath his nose with trembling fingers. "You know, I got a granddaughter your age. She's brave, too. I want my mom." "I know." One of the gunmen shouted, "Quiet!" Sophie flinched. Harold put his hand gently over hers. In the service passage behind the lounge, Mason moved with 2 SWAT officers. He saw the guard before the guard saw him. Young, nervous. Rifle too loose in his hands. Finger where it shouldn't be. Mason waited. The fire alarm shrieked in pulses. On the next pulse, Mason moved. No flourish. No dramatic fight. He drove a fire extinguisher forward as a shield, trapped the rifle against the wall, turned the man's wrist, and put him on the floor before the kid could shout. SWAT cuffed him and dragged him back. Mason barely looked at him. "Hostages first," he said. They opened the service corridor behind the seating area. Lena, still trapped in key ops, watched the camera feed stutter back in pieces as Mason guided the evacuation from below. A mother with a baby. 2 children in soccer jerseys. A flight attendant with blood on her sleeve. The elderly man on oxygen. But Sophie was near the center of the hostage group, too close to the leader. Mason saw her through the smoke. She saw him too. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Mason," she mouthed. Mason raised one finger to his lips, then pointed gently toward the floor. "Stay low." Sophie nodded, tiny and terrified. Near the baggage belt, Mason spotted the suspicious device. A black case beneath the conveyor motor. Wires visible. Maybe real. Maybe a bluff. Either way, he did not touch it. This was not a movie. "Marking possible device," he said into the radio. "Baggage transfer junction Keast, under motor housing. Approach through service lane 3. Avoid main belt corridor. Bomb technicians acknowledged." Above, Salerno's men realized hostages were disappearing. The leader grabbed Ray Donovan and shoved him into the open. "You said this system was locked down," he snarled. Ray raised both hands. "I can fix it. I can fix it." "You can't fix anything." Ray saw Mason across the smoke-filled concourse. Their eyes met. For 1 second, Ray looked relieved, as if Mason might save him from the consequences of his own choices. Then the leader spotted Sophie trying to crawl behind a row of seats. He grabbed her backpack and yanked her upright. Lena screamed over the open internal line. "Sophie!" The gunman pressed the rifle close to the child and shouted toward the operations room camera. "Open the controls now or she dies!" Ray's face went gray. Mason felt something old and cold settle behind his ribs. Not rage. Rage made men sloppy. This was focus. Mason keyed his radio. "Cut lights in C-18 and C-19 only. Not full terminal. On my mark." The SWAT commander responded, "Ready." Mason looked up at the local speaker panel. Years earlier, he had rerouted a bad amplifier in that zone. It still had a manual test function behind the access plate. He opened it, crossed 2 leads with the insulated tip of his multi-tool, and sent a blast of distorted feedback screaming through the speakers. The gunman flinched. "Mark," Mason said. The gate area dropped into controlled darkness. Not chaos, not blackout. Precision. SWAT moved through assigned angles. Mason crossed low through broken glass and smoke. The gunman holding Sophie shifted, trying to drag her backward toward the jet bridge. Mason came from his blind side, fast enough to surprise, controlled enough not to endanger the child. He caught Sophie by the back of her jacket and pulled her down behind a row of seats as a round cracked into the wall above them. Glass sliced into Mason's shoulder, hot and deep. He ignored it. Sophie clung to him, sobbing. "I've got you," Mason said. "Stay behind me." The words hit him harder than the glass. "Stay behind me. We're going home." He handed Sophie into the arms of a SWAT officer moving through the service corridor. "Take her to her mother," Mason said. The officer nodded and disappeared with the child. In Cheops, Lena collapsed when the door opened and Sophie ran into her arms. For 3 seconds, there was no airport, no guns, no betrayal. Only a mother holding her daughter like she had pulled her back from the edge of the world. Then Lena looked at the SWAT officer. "Mason? He's still inside," the officer said. Lena closed her eyes. Of course he was. The final gunman dragged the state senator and several remaining hostages toward the jet bridge door. "I'll kill him!" the man shouted. "Back off!" Mason saw where he stood, 3 feet from a locked auxiliary fueling access hatch beneath the gate service platform. A hatch Mason had complained about for months because the mechanical latch stuck in cold weather. He got on the radio. "Commander, he's exposed on his left side from the subfloor service bay. Blind spot under the gate counter. I can open the hatch. Negative, coal, hold position. He's going to start shooting. A beat. SWAT moving." Mason crawled beneath the gate equipment through a space built for cables, not men with bad knees and bleeding shoulders. He reached the hatch and pulled the latch. It stuck. Of course it did. He braced one boot, gripped the handle, and forced it hard enough that pain flashed white down his arm. The hatch popped. The gunman turned at the sound. That was all SWAT needed. Mason came up from below and drove the man's weapon arm upward as 2 officers hit from the side. The shot went into the ceiling. The senator dropped. The hostages screamed and covered their heads. 3 seconds later, it was over. No dead hostages. No explosion. No massacre. Just smoke, sirens, crying people, and Mason Cole sitting on the floor with his back against a gate counter, pressing one hand to his bleeding shoulder. Lena found him there after Sophie had been carried safely outside and checked by paramedics. She dropped to her knees beside him. "You idiot," she said, crying. Mason looked up. "Good to see you too. Sophie's safe." He closed his eyes for one brief second. Then he nodded. "Good." When the hostages were out and the suspects secured, Ray tried to disappear among evacuees wrapped in foil blankets. He made it as far as the outer corridor. 2 FBI agents stopped him. Ray immediately pointed toward Mason. It was him, Ray said, desperate. Cole knew everything. He knew the doors, the cameras, the tunnels. He set me up. He's been behind this whole thing. The words hung there, ugly and absurd. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a woman's voice cut through. No, he didn't. Dana Whitaker stepped forward with Tommy beside her. Tommy clutched his phone like evidence in a murder trial, which, in a way, it was. My son recorded Mr. Donovan putting something in Mason's locker, Dana said. Lena stood beside Sophie, one arm wrapped protectively around her daughter. And I have the system snapshot, Lena said. He took my badge, locked me in Keops under a fake data breach accusation, and helped those men use my daughter against me. Ray shook his head. No, that's not. You made me delete the backup, Lena said. But you didn't know where I hid the copy. Pete Larkin, the guard who had claimed Mason attacked him, stood near the paramedics with soot on his face. Mason had pulled him from a smoke-filled hallway during the evacuation, though Pete had not deserved it. Pete looked at Ray, then at Mason. His face crumpled. He made me lie, Pete said. I owed him money. Betting. He said if I didn't say Mason hit me, he'd ruin me. Ray's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You don't understand, he snapped. Mason should have left it alone. He should have just ignored that door like everybody else. The FBI agent beside him went still. Agent Voss tilted her head. What door, Ray? Ray realized too late what he had said. His face went slack. The handcuffs clicked shut. Federal investigators did the rest. They found the money transfers, the edited footage, the access logs, the false reports, the internal administrator Ray had bribed, the smuggling route through Key 117, the crates, the weapons, Salerno's network. Ray Donovan was not a mastermind. That almost made it worse. He was weak, frightened, indebted, and selfish. He had been offered chances to tell the truth, and each time he chose the easier lie. He betrayed the airport, the people inside it, a mother and child, and the one man who had trusted him enough to come quietly with a concern instead of making a public accusation. As agents led him away, Ray looked at Mason. For once, there was no charm left in him. Mace, he said, voice breaking. I'm sorry. Mason stood with a bandage under his torn shirt, and blood dried along his collar. He looked at Ray for a long moment. Then he said nothing. Some apologies arrived too late to deserve an answer. The airport issued a public apology 2 days later. The police cleared Mason of all accusations. The businessman's missing property had been planted. The assault report was false. The security footage had been altered. By then, the media had already found the story. They called him the quiet hero of Pine Ridge, a retired Delta Force operator working maintenance, a falsely accused veteran who returned to save the airport that had turned its back on him. News trucks lined his street. Reporters knocked on his door. Morning shows requested interviews. A cable network offered a special segment. Mason turned almost all of them down. When he finally agreed to stand behind a podium for 3 minutes, he looked deeply uncomfortable in a borrowed blazer, his shoulders stiff beneath the fabric. I didn't do this alone, he said. Law enforcement did their jobs. Fire and EMS did theirs. Airport employees stayed calm under pressure. Lena Brooks protected critical evidence and helped restore communications while her daughter was being threatened. Tommy Whitaker had the courage to preserve the truth when adults tried to bury it. A reporter shouted, Master Cole. Dole, do you consider yourself a hero? Mason paused. No, he said. I consider myself responsible for what I can do in the moment I'm given. That was all he said. Pine Ridge International offered him a senior security consulting position with a salary 3 times what he made in maintenance. Mason declined. Then he reconsidered. I'll consult part-time, he told the airport director. On 3 conditions, the director leaned forward. Name them. Whistleblower protections for employees, independent audits of security footage and access logs, and maintenance gets included in emergency planning. The people fixing the doors usually know which ones won't open. The director nodded. Done. Mason returned to work 2 weeks later. Not full-time nights anymore. His doctor insisted on light duty while his shoulder healed. But he came back wearing the same old reflective vest, now freshly washed, his name still stitched over the pocket. People treated him differently. That was the hardest part. Some stared. Some apologized too loudly. Some avoided him because shame makes cowards of decent people. Lena did not treat him differently. She still gave him grief about his coffee, his stubbornness, and his refusal to replace his ancient flip phone. Sophie made him a card in purple crayon. On the front, she drew a man in a yellow vest standing beside an airplane. Inside, she wrote, "Thank you for finding me." Mason read it at his kitchen table and sat still for a long time. Then he placed it beside Ellen's photograph on the mantel. Lena was promoted to emergency operations manager 3 months later. Tommy Whitaker received a model Boeing 787 signed by the SWAT team, the airport fire crew, and Mason, though Mason's signature was small and nearly hidden near the tail. At home, Mason finally opened the locked steel box beneath his bed. For years, he had treated it like a coffin for a life he wanted buried. This time, he set it on the kitchen table. Inside were medals, old photographs, folded letters, unit patches, and the ghosts of men who had never gotten to grow old. He took out a silver-framed photo of Ellen and placed it beside the box. "I tried," he said softly. The empty house gave no answer. But for the first time in years, the silence did not feel like punishment. A month after the crisis, Pine Ridge held a small ceremony near Terminal C. Not a flashy event, no marching band, no political circus, just airport employees, first responders, a few families of hostages, and a plaque honoring everyone who had acted with courage that day. Mason stood near the back. One by one, people came to him. A baggage handler who had believed the rumors shook his hand and said, "I'm sorry, man." A gate agent hugged him without asking. Pete Larkin approached with red eyes and trembling hands. "I don't expect forgiveness," Pete said. Mason looked at him. "Good," he said. Then, after a moment, he added, "Get help. Tell the truth from now on."